بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As always, we begin with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by sending peace and blessings upon the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his family and his companions. This is perhaps one of the most exciting talks that I have been asked to prepare in terms of my personal interest and in terms of all of the information that I want to convey to you. And if anything, perhaps the problem is that there is a bit too much information to convey 6.5 years worth, and indeed probably more than that if we talk about before and after, to convey 7 or 8 years worth of history and of benefit and information and experience into 45 minutes is a difficult thing to do. However, I will seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in doing so. And I have from what I have heard of the previous lectures from the brothers who came before me, I've thoroughly enjoyed them. So I hope that inshaAllah ta'ala today will also be enjoyable and will be of benefit. Because I think all of us, when we started this program or this series of talks with the intention of telling you of our experiences in Medina and our memories of studying in Medina, I think that every single person who has spoke has intended a benefit greater than simply telling you a story. A benefit in some of the lessons of seeking knowledge, and indeed for me, it is about being able to, if you like, support a generation of students who will come after me and will come after the brothers who are speaking and who have spoken over the last couple of weeks, and for those people to be better than we were and to achieve something better than we achieved. And I think that if this lecture goes some way towards inspiring somebody to do that or supporting somebody in doing that, then this will be a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'd like to begin my memories of Medina with a little bit of background about myself. As the brother said, I became Muslim at the age of 14. I went through a couple of years of struggling to practice. And I think I was probably somewhere between 17 and 18 years old when I really decided to commit myself to practicing Islam as best I could. And it was at that time that somebody told me about the Islamic University of Medina. And I vaguely remember the brother telling me, in a sense of him saying to me, there's this place you can go, you can study. It's set up for people who are reverts like yourself. They teach you Arabic and you can come back and work in da'wah. And that's pretty much how he explained it to me. He said, you can come back and work in da'wah. And I thought, this is something amazing. And since I heard about it, I had something in my heart that this is something that I want to do. I did relatively well at school in terms of my grades and so on and so forth. I had all of the conditions that I needed in order to apply. And so I had in my mind that this is something I really, really want to do. Now, at this point, I want to introduce or to mention the first benefit or my first piece of advice, which is that many, many people get to this stage that I'm telling you about now. They've heard about Medina, and Medina is something really interesting and something really amazing, and they have this idea that you can come back and you can work in the field of da'wah, whether it be towards Muslims or whether it be in a masjid or whether it be in an Islamic organization or whether it be towards the non-Muslims, but you have an idea that you can make a career or a living out of it. A lot of people get to that stage. But I want you really to pay attention and to reflect upon how you get from that stage to actually committing yourself to studying and to learning Islam and actually being willing to make the sacrifices. For me, I looked at the conditions that were required. As always, I looked on the internet and, you get a varied sort of mix of what people tell you need, but you come up with an idea of something that you need and I settled on the problem being the tazkiyah, that I needed to get a reference. And it so happened that in Newcastle, the main masjid that we have in Newcastle, Masjid al-Tawheed, Newcastle Central Mosque, there is a Saudi sheikh who visits every single year, and he visited and helped to build the masjid. So naturally, he was the first person that I went to. And I remember going to him and I was a little bit nervous. And I think it was at the time that Sheikh Sudais came to Newcastle. And of course I asked Sheikh Sudais, as is the norm, and in Newcastle it's probably a little bit easier to ask someone like him than it is here where you have stewards and you have everything sealed off. In Newcastle we went and we asked him. And Sheikh Sudais, as is his nature, he is very welcoming, and he was very much like, yes, I'll help you, I'll do what you need. But he's also very busy. And he soon forgot about what I asked him to do, and probably was asked by another 50 or 100 people on the same trip, and he forgot. So I got the impression that this promise of his was something that he made with good intentions, but it wasn't something that really was ever going to result in me getting accepted into the university. So then it came to this Sheikh Muhammad Saleh, who comes every year to Newcastle. And I sat with him with the translator, and I explained to him that we'd asked Sheikh Sudais, but that the Sheikh had not gotten back to me and perhaps he'd forgotten, and would he give me a tazkiyah? And I remember, and I'm going to give you by meaning because I can't remember the exact words, but he said to me something like this. He said to me, do you know any Arabic? And I said, the translator translated. I said, no, I don't know any Arabic. He said, do you attend any lessons? Do you travel to learn? Do you go to the other cities? I said, no. He said to me, you want to travel thousands of miles away from your family, away from your friends, to a country with a completely different climate that you're not used to. It's very hot. And you want to, or you have an idea that you're going to go there and study when you can't make the effort to study here in your own country. When the opportunities are all around you and it just requires a little bit of effort. And he said, I'm not going to give you a tazkiyah. And I was very angry with him at the time. I said, why is he being like this, And I told him that Sheikh Sudais forgot about my request, and now what do I do? And he's refusing to give it, and I don't understand. Wallahi, if you take nothing away from this talk today except that advice, it would be worth you coming. Because when I went to Medina, I realized the value of the advice that he gave me. When you go to Medina, you are the same person. If you are lazy in the UK, you will be lazy in Medina. Except those who Allah has mercy upon. If you're not making an effort to travel 5 miles in the UK, you won't make an effort when you travel how many thousand miles to Medina. This is the reality of study. How many of the brothers, the shaitan, and this is from talbis iblis, from the tricks of the shaitan upon them, that the shaitan comes to them and tells them, if you go to Medina, you're going to be a good person. If you go to Medina, you're going to have istiqamah. If you go to Medina, you're going to be able to study. If you go to Medina, you'll learn Arabic. Ya ikhwan, in reality, if I'm talking about Birmingham, I see that the brothers from Birmingham are not willing to travel to Dudley for the beneficial knowledge. Is this true or not? You're not willing to travel to Dudley. Rather, some of you are not willing to travel to the other side of Birmingham for beneficial knowledge. Wallah, this person will never be successful in Medina, except who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon. You make the effort now, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the ability to make the effort there. And I didn't realize the value of this. I was very angry with the sheikh, because he didn't give me the tazkiyah, and he wasn't very nice to me about it, and he told me the painful, bitter truth. But it was the truth. That if I wasn't willing to make that effort here, then in reality, not a lot is going to change over there. And all of the students I met in Medina, I didn't meet a student except this applies to them. that if they worked hard and they strived hard in the UK, you saw them working hard and striving hard in Medina. And the vast majority of them who came lazy went home lazy. And so this is something that I want to emphasize to people, that you do not need to wait for Medina to come or for another university to come for you to learn your deen. You can start learning and striving and struggling now, and then when the opportunity comes, and if the opportunity comes for those people that it comes for, alhamdulillah. And if it doesn't, it shouldn't get in the way of you learning your deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not limited learning your religion to one city in the world, or 2 cities in the world, or 3. Every single person has the ability, but you know what it is? It's hard. You have to get up at times you don't want to get up, and you have to go places you don't want to go, and you have to suffer, and you have to, have a bit of blood, sweat and tears. And this has to happen now for those people who want to study. So I kind of gave up on the tazkiyah idea, and I kind of put Medina on the back burner. And I remember I was teaching in the masjid. I think was teaching Quran to the children in the masjid. And I got a phone call from Shaykh Shu'aib Mirpuri, who was the General Secretary of the Markaz Jamiyat Ahl Hadith at the time. And he said to me, "Brother Muhammad, would you like to go to Hajj?" I said to him, "Shaykh, I'd love to go to Hajj, but I can't afford it." He said, "No, you can go to Hajj for free." And I think this is probably the first experience I had of the Saudi system, except you have to get your passport to me tomorrow with the photocopies and with the medical certificate, and everything has to be done like yesterday. So quickly it was all put through, and we ended up, it was so late and so last minute that they actually sent the visas to the airport when we were getting on the plane. They sent the passports with the visas in to the airport when we were getting on the plane. And at this time, just before that trip, I think I had first of all been for my khitbah to ask for my wife's hand in marriage, and I'd agreed that I was going to get married after the Hajj. And this is because Medina really wasn't in my mind, and I didn't really have a great deal of knowledge about what it was going to be like as a married student. So I went ahead and kind of put Medina on the back burner and decided to get married. And at this point I had decided to get married, and I went on this Hajj trip. And of course when I went on Hajj, I saw in the itinerary that we were going to Medina. And I thought, subhanallah, if we're going to Medina, why don't I take the documents with me? So I printed out the application form, and I did my best to fill it out. And of course it isn't the easiest application form to fill out in the world. And I brought my certificates and what I could, and I left the tazkiyah. I thought, you know what it is? I'm going to go and see what happens. And when we got to Medina, I actually went with Imam Zakaullah from this masjid, and the 2 of us, we went. And when we were in Medina, I said to him that I wanted to apply to the university. And he had a friend in the university called Adik, who's a very, very good friend of mine. And Adik took us, or helped us, to go to the university. But of course, we still had this problem of missing the tazkiyah. So I was frantically phoning, and Zakaullah was frantically phoning around various people. And we phoned the same shaykh who refused to give me the tazkiyah the first time. And of course, he's from Riyadh. And he said, "Now that I've seen you've made the effort and you've come to Medina and you've got your documents in your hand, I'll give you the tazkiyah. Except I'm in Riyadh and there's no way for me to send it to you." But he said, "Don't worry, phone this number. This is a teacher in Medina, he will help you." And we went to the Hajj group and asked for my passport so that I could take the passport there to show them. They said no. We got to the gates of the university, and again, this is my second experience probably of Saudi, the way that the life works in Saudi. The security guard just decides to pick on me. "Where are you going?" And I said, there's a call I was translating, and he's going for an interview, and there's a doctor waiting for him, and everything is organized, and they're going to give him his interview. He said, "No, students only. You can't come in." So at this point, I have no tazkiyah. I have only half my documentation. I have no passport copy, and the security guard isn't letting me in. Not going well so far. So I went out, and I don't remember who suggested it. Was it Zakawla? Was it the brother Atiq? But I think it was the brother Atiq. Is that somebody ended up giving me a shamagh, a red shamagh. I don't know if I had it with me or if he gave it to me. I don't even remember. But he said, put on the shamagh, carry these books, and just walk straight past him. He's going to think you're a student. So off we went. And as far as I remember, we got stopped in the car park again. I don't know what they were doing that day, because in the whole time I went to Medina after that, nobody ever stopped me for anything. But on that day, he was determined, you know. I don't know if he was getting commission or something for every student that he stopped, but he was determined. And in the end, we managed to get through with a little bit of tawriyah in terms of are you a student? And the other brother replies, yes, I'm a student. And you know, like, then the kind of everyone's nodding and everyone's looking at each other and so on. In the end, somehow or other, we get in. We get in and we get to the university, and I did my interview and everything went fine. And they ticked all the boxes, and he said, okay, can I have your tazkiyat? Even the passport was okay. He said, no problem. Your passport you can send with another student, but I need you to have your 2 tazkiyat. So I said, I don't have them. Now, I had one of them, I think was faxed over to me by someone from the markaz, faxed over me, maybe Abdul Hadi or Shu'aib, faxed over me a tazkiyah. So I had one of them, and I gave it. And I said, I don't have the other one. He said, I'm sorry, the rules are, we can't accept your application. The passport, I can leave it until another time, your friend can bring it for you. But he said, the tazkiyah, we can't accept your application. I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. I can't accept you if you don't have the other tazkiyah. And so I was like, subhanallah. I got stopped at the gate. I had all these problems. I did my interview, and now one piece of paper I'm short. And that doctor who had met us on behalf of the shaykh in Riyadh, he said to me, he turned to me and he said to me, or he said to the brother who was doing my interview, do you have a spare piece of paper? The brother said, yeah, sure, there you go. He took a pen, he wrote Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and he wrote me the tazkiyah right there and then. He said, if you won't accept him, I will write him a tazkiyah. There you go. And he wrote the tazkiyah and he gave it, and the man said, that's it, 2 tazkiyah, everything's done, wait for the list to come out. I went back, I got married, and of course I didn't think anything about it. I didn't realistically think that, I don't think I ever thought I won't be accepted. I mean, we don't have that kind of sort of that Allah is not going to answer my dua or I'm not going to be accepted. But at the same time, I didn't have in my mind that, yeah, I'm going to be accepted. And by the time came for the list to come out, I had almost completely forgotten about everything. So then I got another call from Shaykh Shu'aib again. Brother Muhammad. I said, yes, Shaykh. He said, you've been accepted in Medina. And I was just speechless. My first thought was, I'm married, I have a family. What am I going to do? And I think I was staying, my wife was in Birmingham at the time, and I was in Newcastle, and I think I phoned her and told her. And, mashallah, tabarakallah, I have to say, may Allah Azza wa Jal reward my wife. She's been incredibly, incredibly patient with me over this time. I mean, newly married, and within 4 months or 3 months, I'm off to Medina. And of course, I can't take her. At least I said to her, the first year, I won't be able to take you. And then came the issue of getting together the documents. Because for those of you who know about the application to Medina, it's a 2-phase process, and you have to go through even more difficulty once you've been accepted to get all of the documents and new tazkiyat and new this and that and the other. The biggest problem was ours was the first year that they asked us for a proof from the government or a permission from the government to study. Now this is some idea, I don't know the reasoning behind the person who came up with this idea, that every student who goes to Medina has to get a permission from the government which says that he is allowed to study. More than that the government will take responsibility for him if he was to engage in anything that he shouldn't. And this is something, I mean, we went to the Foreign Office, and I remember I went to the Foreign Office, and I don't know if I went with Aqil or if I went with someone else, but I remember going to the Foreign Office, and in the Foreign Office, they laughed at us. They said, you have a passport which says you're allowed to go wherever you want. If we didn't want you to go, you wouldn't go. We would put you on a, whatever, no-fly list or whatever it is. You have a passport, you can go wherever you want. Why do we need to give you a letter to say that you're going to go? The Foreign Office is not going to do this. So then we thought we might try and get a police record check or anything that we could pass, but it just wouldn't work. Time went on and on, study started, and we were no closer to getting it. I probably made 10 trips to London, maybe more, at least 10 trips to London. And from Newcastle, that's not a short distance. Every time the cultural attaché, those people were so difficult. They made life so hard for us. They refused to talk to us, refused to help us, come back tomorrow. The usual thing that, you're in the queue, they serve everyone, and then you come to the front, and then they close the thing and say, come back tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, I'm from Newcastle. Come back tomorrow is, a 700-mile round trip. It's not like just come back tomorrow. When they go into drone mode, come back tomorrow. But yeah, I'm from Newcastle and I just need you to take this, come back tomorrow. It goes on and on and on, After a while you get used to it. You get completely used to it. But at the beginning it's very difficult to deal with. In the end, to cut a long story short, it was a very trying time, and we even got to the point where we thought that we wouldn't be able to go. And we were told that they wouldn't accept any European students this year, and that we wouldn't be able to go to Medina, we wouldn't be able to study. We kept on making dua, we kept on going, we kept on trying, we kept on having the door slammed in our face. And in the end, the shaykh again from Riyadh came again to Newcastle. And we mentioned the situation to him, and he became very angry with the embassy. And all I remember is he picked up the phone, and from what I could gather of the conversation, he phoned the ambassador, and he said the ambassador wasn't available. And he was shouting on the phone. Well, if not shouting, he was visibly sort of angry. And he said, tell the ambassador to call me back as soon as he is finished. And he gave the ambassador a real hard time. He said to the ambassador, what's going on with these students? Why are you stopping their visas? Why, what is this going on? The ambassador said, I have no idea. This is all the visa section. I never knew anything about it. Give me a couple of hours. Within 2 or 3 hours on that day, everything was sorted. And that's another thing I learned about Saudi. The wasita. If you know the right person, something can be done very, very quickly. One call to the ambassador, suddenly there's no condition for any letter from the government, and there's no condition for any paper, and the visas are ready. And the same people who were so rude to you before are suddenly incredibly nice when you have a letter from the ambassador. They were so rude to you before, and they're so nice to you. They change in a second. And one of them said to me, you put me in a big trouble. You almost lost me my job. He was very angry with me. And what can you say to him? He said to him, this is the way that you treat us. What did you want us to do? He said, you shouldn't have gone to him. You should. In any case, we got everything together. We finally got our papers, and off we went to Medina. As always, everything is rush, because as soon as you get your papers, we realized that by now study has gone on for at least, in my mind, a month. I might be wrong, but I think at least a month had passed where study had started. And we turned up very, very late. And imagine this. I land in Medina, and of course the normal way is when all the students are being accepted, there are people to meet you at the airport, and there are people who do this, and there are people who organize you. We had nobody. Alhamdulillah, a brother from the Seychelles picked us up, a brother called Abdurrahman, picked us up in his car because he was meeting some other brothers who were from London, that brother was from Mauritius, which is very near, and the two of them knew each other, and he ended up taking us in his car or in a taxi following his car, turned up at the door of the Jamia, still nobody there. Term has started, they're not doing enrollment anymore. We had to find out, and this is the usual thing. You're running from building to building, and you soon realize that the campus is big and it's very hot. And the campus is big. It's not a small campus to walk from one side to the other. And you're walking back and forwards and go here, go there, and the same thing again, just of the bureaucracy and the go here, go there, go to this guy, go to that guy. And I mean I have so many stories I can tell you about the bureaucracy. I had one guy rip up my paper and throw it in the bin because the previous guy had signed it in blue ink. Not because blue ink wasn't allowed, because he didn't like blue ink. He said, I don't like blue ink. And he ripped it up and put it in the bin. Go and get me a one in black ink. And it wasn't me that had written in blue ink. It was his other colleague who had written in blue ink. Ripped it up, put it in the bin. Go and get me one in black ink. In the end, you get completely used to it. At the beginning, many students leave. Many students leave because of the combination of stress, the combination of pressure, the combination of being far away from family, of having difficulty in the way that people treat you, in issues to do with the weather and to do with their health and people getting sick when they first came, and a large number of people left. So we were allocated what I now call the infamous building number 1. Building number 1. What can I tell you about building number 1? Even the rats moved out. Even the rats moved out. Wallahi, the rats moved out of building number 1. Because it wasn't a high enough standard for them. I mean, subhanallah, this building was marked for demolition. It's bad when the building itself is marked for demolition, and they put us into building number 1. And we were 6 people to a room. And there were a couple of students from the UK in my room. And that was a whole new experience. I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it because the time is going to go, but that was a whole new experience, to be with students from other countries, people from countries you never even heard of, and people who, to put it in a nice way, don't have the same standards of hygiene that you have. And the toilets and the showers were a nightmare. I mean, one time, I'll tell you how bad it got. One time, we saw, you're waiting in a long queue for the toilet, and the guy goes into the cubicle before you and he closes the door. And then you see him, you just see the upper part of his torso just raised right up above the toilet cubicle door. And at this point I'm thinking, that's weird. And he's actually stood, because he's never seen a regular Western style toilet before. He stood himself on the cistern. He's climbed up onto the cistern. And he stood himself over the cistern. And he's doing what he's doing. And that's not a nice thing to go into when you're the next guy in the cubicle. And this is the kind of situation in the beginning. And of course, at that time you're on a high. You're so happy, it's Medina, you're here, you finally got here after all that difficulty and all of that trouble. And of course, building 1 soon became deserted very quickly because there were no partitions between the beds, there were 6 people to a room, the bathroom was terrible. And it soon became deserted. But I had this strategy that I thought, I'm not going to try and move out because I'm going to try and bring my family, and that means I'm going to get my own place. I'd rather stay here and probably end up with a room almost to myself because people are leaving that place as quick as they can. And they've realized that if you spend all the time between Asr and Maghrib kind of running between the other buildings and you find a spare bed, you can quickly go and put a request in to change your room to another room. And people were moving out very quickly. So in the end, there were only a few of us left in that actual building, and we had a lot more space than other people had, and it wasn't so bad when the larger number of people had moved out. Of course, in the early days in Medina, you have your experiences, and I mean these experiences just keep coming. I could tell you them all night. I mean the time when we all went for an X-ray, and the guy went behind the LED screen but left all of us in front of the LED screen. So he goes behind the LED screen, puts on his big thick LED apron thing with the lining in, and he's dressed up for his X-ray, and then he just does 10 X-rays just one after the other with us all stood next to each other. So we got 10 doses in one. We had all the injections, all the checks, all the medical tests, and again and again and again. And at this point you are literally just copying the person in front of you. You have no idea what's going on. You know that there are 1 or 2 students who have a little bit of Arabic, and I'd done probably, I think, maybe 6 lessons from Medina Book 1 with Zakawullah, which was a huge help because I had something, at least I could, had a few words. But you're just going and, the same thing, the guy's talking to you as though you're fluent in Arabic and you're just nodding or shaking your head or turning to the guy next to you and asking what's going on. And I think one of the first things, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, is that the first thing that you notice is the other students and the fitan and the problems that exist between the other students, and especially the students from the English-speaking countries. And I soon came to the conclusion that just abandoning the students from the English-speaking countries was the better way to go about it. Because, we had students who used to stand in the corridor, and there used to be a brother go past from, like maybe he's come from somewhere where there's not a lot of Islamic knowledge, and they would ask him a question about aqidah, or they would ask him, what do you think about this shaykh, and what do you think about that shaykh? And he would say, la adri, and then they would, sort of stand in the corridor and say, oh, he's mubtadi', he's an innovator. And, this is the situation we found among the students the first day you go. Now, these are people, the brother who used to do this, wallahi, the brother who used to do this, he did not pray one prayer in the jama'ah. He used to hold some opinion. He said he took the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, something like that, that you don't pray in the jama'ah when there's no limit to traveling, and he applied that to himself, and then he said that therefore I don't pray in the jama'ah, even though the jama'ah was next door. And yet his shughluhu shaghil, the thing that he used to do day and night, was to stand and declare who was on the sunnah and who was off the sunnah. And this is a brother who doesn't have istiqamah. He doesn't have the most basic requirements of practicing Islam, let alone any ilm at all. But this was the situation. And this is difficult as well. It adds to the pressure because you become wary of the other students from the US and the UK. You don't want to mix with them for the reason that you're just sticking with who you know. I knew Aqil, I knew a couple of brothers, and you're just sticking with who you know because the situation is that all the talk among the students, there's nothing about Arabic, there's nothing about learning Islam. It's all about what do you think about this that happened and what do you think about that, and qil wa qal. And none of it is referring it to the shuyukh and the ulama who were there in Medina. It's simply just everyone talking with hawa, with their own desire, with their own, or I heard this from a student, we heard this. And of course, this is a time that really made it difficult for a lot of students, and there were some students who left because of this. At this time, really, I developed a mentality. And the mentality that I had developed was, regardless of what happens, I will not quit. And I just had this thing that even if they phoned me tomorrow and told me, this has happened in your country or this has happened to your family, whatever happened, I swore to Allah and I made an oath to myself, I will not leave, no matter how bad things get. And my first test came when I heard that my wife was expecting. And that she was expecting to have our first child literally a matter of days after the last exam. And this was a time, honestly, this is the first time where I really, really genuinely thought of leaving. And I genuinely thought, look, this is, I can't do this. I can't handle all this stuff that's going on, and I can't handle the fact, I was only married, I'd only been married maybe 3 months, 4 months. I'd then come, to Medina, left my wife. Now she's expecting the due date is maybe 3 or 4 days after the exam time. Am I going to get back in time? What's going to happen to my marriage if I don't? And all of these things. But I had that attitude. I had that thing that, look, I did what I did in order to get in. I suffered what I suffered in order to get in. I'm not going to quit for anything, no matter what happens. So I did my very best. And I did my best to study as much as I could. And in my first year, I came to my first year exams, and I did really well. I was really happy, alhamdulillah, with what I did. I did really well in my Arabic, and I was pleased with it. And it came to my second term exams, and the night before the exam, I was up late studying, the night before the exam. And then when I was up late, and in exam time, you see the masjid of the Jamia is full of people studying at night time. And I was there studying, and I went to the bathroom. And the nearest bathroom was in building number 2. And I went over to building number 2 to use the bathroom. And I opened the door, and a cat just jumped on me. And it was just this crazy cat. It ripped me, it cut me all up, it scratched me, it bit me. I, hit it a few times. And of course the cat went, running down the corridor, but I was in a pretty bad state. I was covered, in my thobe, my white thobe was covered in blood. I was like, I had bites, I had scratches. And I remember walking into the masjid. And of course, my biggest problem is, I actually don't know how to say in Arabic that a cat just jumped and scratched me. And I didn't know how to say this in Arabic. So the best I could say was, the cat hit me. Darabani. Because I don't know how to say it scratched me. So the best thing I can say is, the cat hit me. So I come and I tell my friend, it's a cat, it hit me, and he took me to the hospital. And then they tell me that, it was a cat that had rabies, and you need to have rabies injections. And this is just, subhanAllah, this is the night before my main exam day, the day that I had the hardest exams on. And I literally finished my treatment and cleaning me up at Fajr. There was a lovely Saudi brother who was a nurse working there, and he cleaned me all up, patched me up, and took me, and basically I got out of there at Fajr time, and the exam was 8 o'clock. So there was like 2 hours straight into the exam. Alhamdulillah, again, my grades came out. I was very happy with it. But the problem was getting back home, because I was desperate to get back home. And at that time, the university didn't have great organization when it came to tickets. In fact, you would be very surprised to see how the students would behave when it came to ticket time. All the talab al-ilm went out the window, all of the adab, all of the akhlaq is gone. It's just a scrum, and it's pushing people, tripping people up, squeezing in the queue in front of people, fights breaking out. There's all sorts going on at the time. And I think this is probably worse because I was trying to get with the earliest group, and there's a limited number of tickets, and a lot of people are doing transit via London, so it's difficult. In the end, I remember, really getting really upset with the travel agent, because he was just being his usual self of, there's no tickets. And I said, you didn't look. And he went, yeah, I know I didn't look, but there's no tickets, And he was giving the usual sort of thing. And I remember I even said to some of them that, look, this is really urgent for me. And I'm not asking you to let me miss my exam. I'm asking you that on the day of my last exam, you let me go home. And the guy said, why? Why would you want to be there for your son's birth? Which man wants to be there for his son's birth? He said to me like this, he said, this is ajib, we've never, ما سمعنا بهذا في آبائنا الأولين. We never heard our fathers doing anything like this. That you want to be there for your son's birth? He was shocked about it. In the end, I managed somehow with some changing of tickets. There was always a trick. You took the ticket from the university, then you went to a travel agent, and the travel agent managed to open the ticket and change the date and all of this kind of stuff. In the end, I got there, and in the end, I got there in time for Abdurrahman's birth. And then came the next major event. And the next major event is the decision to bring my wife. And I promised my wife, I'd said to her that in the second year, I'll bring you. And of course, there was no iqama. I'd been in the first year all around. By this time, I'd got myself a house. But I wasn't in the flat. I wasn't allowed to stay in it because it's in an area where there are families. And he said, please don't stay in it until your family comes. And I said, that's fair enough. No problem. And of course, I didn't have an iqama for my wife. So I decided to do what all the students were doing at the time and bring my wife on an umrah visa. The first problem I had was that the umrah visa required a mahram, and the computer wouldn't accept me as the mahram unless I had an umrah visa. So I got an umrah visa stamped in my passport, and I had made the decision that inshallah when it comes to the airport, I'm going to hand him my student visa. He's not going to see my umrah visa. I'm going to hand him my student visa and my wife's umrah visa. But I panicked at the airport time. And I thought, what if he takes my wife? What if he sends my wife home? What will I do? My son was only maybe 2 months or 3 months old. What am I going to do? So in the airport, I handed him my umrah visa. And I got stamped as an umrah, a mu'tamir, a person performing umrah, an umrah pilgrim, and my wife likewise. And I didn't get my student visa stamped. So that was all fine, and I continued with my study. I mean, my wife found it a little hard when she first went, but again, she was very, very, very patient. And again, it came to midterm. And in midterm, you're allowed to fly back if you pay for your own ticket. So I said, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take my wife back because she's overstayed a little bit, and I don't want her to overstay, you know, months and months and months. I don't want to be one of those students who just keeps my wife there for 6 years on an Umrah visa and she's not allowed to go out of the house and she's frightened of getting arrested by immigration. I don't want to be like this. So I said, inshallah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wife back. So I applied to take my wife back. It was accepted. And then I got called to go back to check on my visa. So I went to check on my visa. He said, Brother Muhammad, you're not in the country. I said to him, Ya akhi, look in front of you, I'm right here. He said to me, you're not in the country. Your visa has been checked and you haven't come back into the country. So do you want to explain to me why it is that you're here and how it is you got here? So I thought, okay, now it's confession time. I came on an Umrah visa. So they said, look, in all honesty, we have to kick you out. You know, your iqamah has expired. Your student visa has expired. We can't get you another one. And the normal system would be that we have to give you your papers and you have to go home. He said, you know, if you'd come on your student visa, your wife is not a problem. She overstayed a month, you pay a fine, you know, of a couple of 100 riyals or whatever, and she goes home. It's not a problem, you know, but you didn't get your student visa stamped. I'm sorry, you know, that's it. The best I can do is send you to immigration and try and see what you can do. And there was a lovely brother in immigration. He said, look, I can't do anything for you. But all I can do is, the most we can do is to write to one of the princes and ask the prince who's in charge of immigration if he's willing to do anything for you. And at this point they told me the decision was not to help me, but the decision was, is he allowed to stay in the Jamia? So after a long, long time, and honestly this was probably the hardest time of my time in Medina, because I'm being told that basically you're going to be kicked out. You know, you're not going to be able to stay and study, but basically when the prince comes back, he's going to make a decision whether you stay or whether you go. And at this point, I get a phone call from the shaykh in Riyadh. And this was weird. He phoned me up, he said, Muhammad, congratulations, I've got an iqamah for your wife. I've got a residency permit for your wife. I said, Alhamdulillah, that's excellent. So everything was fine. I went home, I told my wife. The next day he phones me up and he's fuming with me. He's fuming with me. He can't almost speak because of how angry he is. And I said to him, Shaykh, what's the matter? He said, you've wasted it. You've wasted your iqamah. You've wasted your opportunity. I said, Shaykh, what's the matter? He said, what's your name? I said, Shaykh, my name's Muhammad. He said, what's your other name? I said, Timothy. He said, why didn't you tell me your other name was Timothy? He had gone to a prince who was high up in the government and got permission for my iqamah under the name Muhammad. And when he took it to the office, they wouldn't process it because my passport was in a different name. And they ripped it up and they told him, you have to go to the prince again. And he said, I can't, you know, that was a one-off opportunity. So that was a big high and a big low. Next thing comes along, the university say, please come and see us. And off I go to come and see them. And when I come and see them, they say to me that we've got excellent news for you. The prince has written back and you can stay in the university. And I was so happy, you know, subhanAllah, that I can stay in the university. I went to immigration. I walked in. I said, I've heard you've got good news. He said, I think the news is maybe better than you think. Not only can you stay in the university, but your wife can stay and your son can stay as well. So subhanAllah, the Prince Muhammad ibn Naif, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he really did me a huge favor. He saw my application and he saw that it was a genuine error, and he decided to give special permission for me to stay and for my wife to stay and my son to stay as well. And they had told me this is impossible. They said, even if he gives it, we can't do it for you. But as soon as they had that in their hands from him, they were able to do it. And I left that year with a residency visa. The only sour end to the year is that I was so distracted by what had happened and by what was going on that I wasn't really able to work as hard as I wanted to in the fourth module. And of course in Medina, the fourth module of Arabic is what judges you in the whole course. So they ignore the fact that I was, I had a very, very high grade for modules 1, 2, and 3, and they looked only at module 4. And in module 4, I was something like 0.1 or 0.2% away from the highest grade that I wanted. And that was a little bit bitter for me, and I had to learn to accept that, because it shouldn't be about the grades you get. Your study shouldn't be about the grades you get. But I was upset because I felt like I had got that grade all the way through, and then at the last hurdle, I'd slipped. And that was, the situation with regard to that. And just continuing on, and I'm not going to take too much more of your time, there's a lot to say. The reality is that every single year that I was in Medina presented a new challenge. Every single year had a new test. Every single year when you thought that you had gotten over the last test, a new test came along. And I've told you the tests before I applied, and the tests when I applied, and after I applied, and coming to Medina, and then the tests with regard to family in the first year, and then, subhanallah, with regard to the wife's visa in the second year. Every year something happened, year after year after year. And I just stuck to that mentality that whatever happens, I'm staying. If this university burns to the ground, I'm going to be the last person sat on that desk. That was my mentality. And of course, the next year was all about kulliyah. And I had to decide what kulliyah you want to go to. And of course, you get told all sorts of things. Don't go to da'wah because that's where people go who are, just looking for an easy ride. Don't go to hadith because it's irrelevant. Go to sharia because you can become a qadi and you'll have all this knowledge of fatawa and fiqh. And people would say to me all sorts of different things. And then there would be the other thing, go to hadith because that's where the Salafis are. And the other kulliyat are full of people who are not upon the aqeedah of the Salaf. And you would hear left, right and center. Ya ikhwan, the conclusion is this. The kulliyah almost doesn't matter. My advice to the brothers regarding choosing their kulliyah is that what matters is how hard you work. Not the kulliyah you go to. Going to kulliyat al-hadith doesn't make you any more upon the aqeedah of the Salaf than going to any other kulliyah or not going to any other kulliyah. Nor does going to kulliyat sharia guarantee that you're suddenly going to reach the level of a mujtahid and start giving fatawa in ijtihad, and you're going to become this huge figure of this huge qadi who's going to judge between the people. It doesn't work like that. The reality is, again, it comes down to you, who you are and how hard you're prepared to work. The reason I think you should choose a kulliyah is the kulliyah that you personally have an interest in. And for me, I just really, really, really wanted to study hadith. I loved hadith. I love the idea of hadith, the science of hadith. It's about what you want to study. It's about what you want to give that time to study for. And no doubt, I found in kulliyat al-hadith, the atmosphere amongst the students was better than the other kulliyat. And I say that in fairness, with all due respect to the other kulliyat. But kulliyat al-hadith, the atmosphere amongst the students in terms of their level of practicing and their level of adherence to the sunnah was noticeable. You went to kulliyat al-hadith, you didn't see someone who was clean shaven. You didn't see someone who was musbil. Or very, very, very rarely. Whereas in the other kulliyat, you would see a lot. But that's not a reflection maybe necessarily on the kulliyah as much as it is on the type of students who choose it. But hadith, no doubt, was a fantastic thing to do, but I knew it was going to be hard. And I knew I didn't really have the hifth maybe to be able to do it, because I knew that, by this time I'd memorized 3 juz of the Quran or 4 juz of the Quran. Maybe I'd memorized up to Surah Al-Dhariyat, approximately, because I couldn't. One of the funny things, and I didn't mention this to you, but one of the funny things about me in the Arabic Language Institute is that I'm dyslexic. I'm not badly dyslexic, but I am dyslexic. And I couldn't read the Quran. I had learned Juz Amma by listening. And that's why if you hear me read Juz Amma, I have more mistakes in Juz Amma than any of the other surahs or any of the other ajza, because I learnt it by listening and not by reading. And because they used to ask us to read from Surah Al-Dhariyat onwards, I memorized from Surah Al-Dhariyat because I couldn't read. I couldn't read fluently. I could read the letters, but I couldn't read fluently. And I really struggled. I was given a paragraph, I really struggled to read, a little bit because of the dyslexia. And so what it was is I would actually memorize the surah that we were told to read from the mushaf. When the other students were just reading it, I was pretending to read it, and I was reading almost completely from memory, with just the help of the letters, one or two to pick out to help me to read a little bit better. So I'd only memorized that much. And I knew it was going to be a tough call in hadith, because we had to memorize Al-Muharrar, which is a thick book of hadith. It's got a lot of hadith in it. It's a good few number of pages, maybe 300-400 odd pages, something like that. It's thick. And we had to memorize it from beginning to end, on top of all the other stuff. And we were told, don't go to Kulliyatul Hadith unless you really want to memorize. But at the end of the day, I felt for me, it's not about the grade. It's got to be about working hard. It's got to be about being with people who are better than me. And this is one, sort of final piece of advice, or one of my final pieces of advice to everyone would be, is if you want to do talabul ilm, surround yourself with people who are better than you. Surround yourself with people who are better than you. Don't surround yourself with these guys who are on your level. Because in all honesty, they're nice, they're good friends, but it doesn't drive you to be better. But you surround yourself with people, all of them have better hifz than you, all of them are more knowledgeable than you, all of them have better Quran than you. Then you drive yourself to meet their level, and you push yourself to make up. And I remember the first teacher, subhanAllah, the first lesson we went into the kulliyah, in Kulliyat al-Hadith, Shaykh Abdul al-Abbad, hafidhahullah ta'ala. Shaykh Abdul Razzaq, and he asked me the first question. And I was so scared, I don't even know what I answered. Maybe I answered it more or less right, but I was terrified to even speak, because they took away that 3rd year of the Arabic Language Institute where people used to get prepared. And this is a huge problem. And I think this is one of the points I want to, sort of conclude with, from the points of benefit, is to say to people that it took me to go to Medina to realize that the Salaf had a way of learning. And that the Jamia Islamiyah, for all of its good, and for all of the blessings that are in it, and for all of the ilm that is in it, it doesn't teach you the way the Salaf used to learn. That's the reality, it doesn't. So you have to make up for that. You have to strive and make up for that. And I made huge mistakes in this, and it wasn't until I got into kulliyah that I realized. I got into kulliyah and I realized that, hold on a minute, I wasn't going to the durus outside of the Jami'ah. I wasn't going to the lessons because in my mind I'm going to learn Arabic, and when I know Arabic I'll go. But the problem is, between knowing Arabic and between being able to understand a lesson fluently, there's a gap. Call it training period, or a acclimatization period you need. And I could have given that to myself, or if the chance came again, I would have given it to myself while I was still in the Arabic Language Institute. Go and listen, even if I didn't understand anything at all. But just go to acclimatize to the language. And so that hit me a little bit in the beginning of the kulliyah. And then, of course, at the beginning of the kulliyah, I began to spend my time in the Masjid al-Nabawi with our shaykh al-Allama, Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, hafidhahullah ta'ala. And I used to spend 6 days a week, 6 evenings a week with the shaykh. And that is, I honestly, wallahi, if that is all I did in Medina, it would have been worth it. If even one of those lessons would have been worth it for the whole 6 years, it was, I can't explain how much we benefited, or how much I benefited from the shaykh, and how much I took from the shaykh, and how much, there was nothing like it. And the Jamia is pale in comparison to the benefit that I took from Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, hafidhahullah ta'ala. And being able to sit with him and being able to observe him and how he answered the questions and how he presented the durus, and to go through a little bit of, or most of Jami' al-Tirmidhi and most of Ibn Majah with him. And subhanallah, my first time in the kulliyah, we had a teacher called Saud al-Jarbu'i. And the teachers I had in the Jamia, hafidhahullah, Shaykh Saud is amazing. Shaykh Saud used to come in without a book. And he used to go, turn to page whatever, and he'd just start. Not just the words on the page, the footnotes, the page numbers, everything, the commas, the full stops, everything. He was just a machine, subhanallah. Like I never met anyone with hifz like that. His hifz was something amazing. He would come in without the book and just start quoting. And this is what Ibn Daqiq al-Eid said, and this is what Ibn Taymiyyah said, and this is what al-Mizzi said. And he would just start going and going and going. And we would say, Shaykh, you know, to the point where he would correct you. If you were reading from the book, he would correct you. He would correct you. And so his exams were legendary. You know, write down hadith number 365, 2 hadith that are before it and 2 hadith that are after it. I mean, this is like, the Shaykh was legendary. But the first exam I did okay. The problem was, in all honesty, that I was always playing catch up. In kulliyah, I was always playing catch up. I was never quite, in terms of the hifth, I was never quite there. I was always catching up with the other students. But I enjoyed it. In terms of understanding, I feel that I was there. I was able to hold my own when it came to understanding, when it came to usul, when it came to principles, when it came to hadith, when I was able to hold my own. But when it came to hifth, I found myself always playing catch up. And that made me struggle a little bit. And when my daughter was born in Medina, she was diagnosed with some intolerances. She had lactose intolerance, and she had an intolerance to milk. And that distracted me again in the, I think it was the second year in kulliyah. And that sort of made me go into a problem. And that was the problem of absence, is that I would be absent and then it became a little bit of a habit. And subhanAllah, when I look back at my grades, I see the grades are fine. But every time you are absent, if you are absent too many times, they would fail you on the course. And so in that way, you know, I felt that kulliyah was a bit of a mixed bag for me. You know, and I felt that it was a bit of a mixed bag. I had very good grades when I was there, but my absences, for whatever reason, and I'm not saying all of them were justified, you know, it becomes a habit after a while, that some of them, you know, led to, you know, failures being given, even though you know the subject, because if you miss 10 lessons out of the term, they fail you. And that's it, you get 0. And so that, you know, that affected me a lot. And so again, my advice to the students who do go is that whatever's going on in your family, not only to have that intention and that burning, you know, sort of desire that whatever happens, I'm going to stay, but also that burning desire that whatever happens, I'm going to stay in the class. Even if my family is sick, even if something is going on, even if I'm not well, being in the class is where that person needed to be. And that did affect me. And I didn't get the grade out of it that I wanted to get, not because I didn't understand the subject, but mostly because I spent sometimes too much time being absent and then had to, you know, to resit the course again. And so that was difficult for me. At the time, it really sort of affected me, and it did kind of hurt me at the time. And it did kind of make me a little bit upset with my time in the kulliyah. But at the end of the day, there's no doubt that the benefit was immense. And there's no doubt that, you know, as a conclusion, I got out of it more than I could have ever dreamed to have gotten out of it. And there's no doubt that if the chance came again, لو استقبلت من أمري ما استدبرت, if the chance came again, I would have done it differently. No doubt. But the reality is, Allah Azza wa Jal decrees, and His decree is the best of decrees, and it's something that we have to work to be content with. And there's no doubt that, you know, in my final point, and I wrote this down as a final point, is that you have to ask yourself, or the students, and my advice to the students who are there now and those who want to go, is that you can't stop. You can't stop with Medina. I came back because of myself and because of my family. You know, I think my wife had been incredibly patient with me, and she wanted to go back. My kids wanted to go back. And, you know, we wanted to take a break. But there's no doubt that, you know, sitting here today, I don't look at myself and say, yeah, Muhammad Tim is where he should be. I look at myself and see that there is a level that I have to aim for that is a lot higher than where I am now. And that is what everyone has to do. And as soon as you become content with yourself, and as soon as that shahada, that certificate becomes what you lean on and you rely on, you lose the benefit of it. And it becomes, you know, this is a piece of paper and I've graduated and that's it now. All I do is I do my jobs and I just get on with it. For me, it's not about that. For me, it's about developing myself further in things like the Quran, because Medina doesn't give a huge emphasis to the Quran in terms of learning different ways of reciting the Quran, in terms of memorizing more, in terms of revising, in terms of catching up, and in terms of going further. And for me, going further is not just about a master's degree or a doctorate degree, but it's also about going further in talab al-ilm. And again, I come back to the point I made, and I really will finish with this, that the Salaf had a way of learning. If you follow that way, you will be successful, inshallah. And if you turn away from it completely, you will not learn, even if you spend your whole life learning. Divide up Islam into modules, into subject areas, have a basic text in each one that you memorize, and have progression through each one. So for example, you say, I've memorized this, I've memorized Thalathatul Usul, I've memorized Kitab al-Tawheed, and I've studied Al-Aqid al-Wasatiyya, and Al-Tahawiyya, and the Tadmuriyya, and Al-Hamawi, and so on. You have a progression in each subject, in fiqh, in Aqidah, in usul, in hadith, in every single thing you have a structure. And you keep going at it and you keep on memorizing. And it doesn't stop. You keep on pushing yourself. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with being able to go back to Saudi very frequently. I go about 3 times a year. At that time, to benefit from the shuyukh as much as possible. But the reality is the same shuyukh come here as well. They come here, they visit from time to time. It's all about what benefit you want to take out of it and how hard you're prepared to work. There's a lot more that I wanted to say, but I've kept you guys for an awful long time. And so inshallah, I think the best thing is for us to wrap up there. You've heard part of the story and perhaps you've heard some of the more interesting parts. And I hope in the end that it has inspired some people to make that effort and to say that I'm not content with being where I am now, but I want to develop myself further and I want to go and study. And that those people who want to go and study realize that it has to start now. And that inshallah, if you've benefited that from the talk, then bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, it has been something that has been of benefit for everybody. Inshallah, I'm happy to take questions, but I know the time is late. So those of you, please don't feel that there's anything holding you here. Those of you who want to get up and leave and you have appointments and things to go to, those who have quick questions, I'm more than happy to answer, inshallah.